On February 27, 2026, NASA Administrator Jared Isaacman stood in front of cameras and said what everyone in the aerospace industry already knew, but no one at the agency had the nerve to admit.
Well, that's exactly right. We are just getting started. I mean, Artemis 2, a historic mission. We send astronauts farther into space than ever before, around the moon, back here to Earth. And I'll tell you, as they were going around the far side of the moon, we were already getting ready for Artemis 3. The hardware is being delivered. We're stacking. We're launching in 2027. That'll be Artemis 3. 2028, that's when we put American astronauts back on the surface of the moon.
Artemis 3, the mission that was supposed to return humans to the moon for the first time since 1972, will not land on the lunar surface. The landing has been stripped from the mission entirely and pushed to Artemis 4 in 2028. Artemis 3 has been downgraded to a low Earth orbit test flight. $93 billion. That is what the Artemis program has consumed from inception through 2025. $93 billion. And not a single human being has traveled beyond low Earth orbit. The per-launch cost of the SLS and Orion stack sits at $4.1 billion. The heat shield nearly failed on its only flight. The hydrogen keeps leaking. And now the agency that put 12 men on the moon with 1960s technology cannot get a single astronaut back to the surface with a 2026 budget. Meanwhile, SpaceX has flown Starship 11 times in 3 years, completed 49 milestones on the lunar lander contract, and is building the V3 architecture that delivers 200 metric tons to orbit. The game is not just over, it never started. The announcement. What NASA actually said. The Artemis 3 landing date has been a moving target since the program began. In 2019, the Trump administration mandated an aggressive 2024 deadline. By 2021, that slipped to 2025 due to Blue Origin's contract lawsuit, spacesuit failures, and COVID supply chain disruptions. In January 2024, heat shield anomalies and Starship refueling delays pushed it to September 2026. Then in February 2026, the Aerospace Safety Advisory Panel issued a blunt assessment, going directly from a lunar flyby on Artemis 2 to a full lunar landing on Artemis 3 required an unacceptable accumulation of operational firsts. Isaacman used the moment to pivot. He acknowledged on the record that the agency should have made better decisions in the past and that going from Artemis 2 straight to a moon landing was never the right pathway.
To pick up the baton that Artemis 2 has handed off, get back to the surface of the moon. So we got a great rotation of astronauts that are coming up for the missions ahead.
On March 24th, he formalized the restructuring at an agency-wide event called Ignition. The Lunar Gateway paused indefinitely. Artemis 3 rescoped to a low Earth orbit rendezvous and docking test, launching no earlier than mid-2027. The first crewed landing pushed to Artemis 4 in 2028. And beginning with Artemis 6, NASA intends to transition entirely to commercial heavy-lift vehicles. Isaacman framed it as safety-driven pragmatism, but the numbers tell a different story. This was not a course correction. It was an admission that the entire legacy architecture, the rocket, the capsule, the contractors, the contracting model itself, had collapsed under its own weight. What Artemis 3 was supposed to be. The original Artemis 3 was designed to be the triumphant return. 4 astronauts launching on SLS, traveling to a near rectilinear halo orbit around the moon, docking with the Starship human landing system, and descending to the lunar South Pole. 2 crew members would spend 6.5 days on the surface, conducting up to 4 spacewalks, traversing 2 kilometers from the lander in next-generation spacesuits, collecting geological samples and mapping water ice deposits in permanently shadowed craters. Under the new profile, none of that happens. Artemis 3 stays in low Earth orbit. The Orion capsule docks with Starship HLS and potentially Blue Origin's Blue Moon lander. Astronauts test life support integration, ship-to-ship communications, and the new Axiom spacesuits in vacuum for the first time. It is essentially an Apollo 9 repeat, a systems checkout mission 58 years later, costing orders of magnitude more. Why it keeps failing. The technical disasters. The delays are not administrative paperwork. They are cascading engineering failures across the entire legacy contractor ecosystem. Start with the heat shield. When Artemis 1's Orion capsule re-entered the atmosphere at Mach 32 in December 2022, the ablative material cracked and shed in over 100 locations. The trapped gas from re-entry friction built up inside the shield matrix and blew chunks off the spacecraft. 3 of 4 separation bolts showed dangerous erosion. The Inspector General explicitly warned that bolt melt beyond the thermal barrier could result in hot gas ingestion behind the heat shield, exceeding structural limits and causing the breakup of the vehicle and loss of crew. Then, Artemis II. During a wet dress rehearsal on February 3, 2026, a 16% hydrogen leak was detected at the tail service mast umbilical at T-5 minutes and 15 seconds. 16% concentration is a highly flammable threshold. The countdown was scrubbed. Subsequent ground tests uncovered helium flow blockages in the upper stage pressurization system. The SLS has been plagued by the exact same liquid hydrogen handling problems that tormented the space shuttle for 3 decades, and SLS can only be produced at a rate of 1 per year. Boeing's manufacturing at the Michoud assembly facility is so slow and so expensive that building a stockpile of vehicles is financially impossible. The Cost Catastrophe, where $93 billion went. Inspector General Paul Martin testified to Congress that the first 4 Artemis missions average $4.1 billion each, and he explicitly called that number unsustainable. A July 2025 GAO report found that Artemis is responsible for nearly half of all cost overruns across NASA's entire major project portfolio. Here is where the money went. Boeing, SLS core stage and exploration upper stage, $2.7 billion in overruns. The EUS was supposed to deliver in 2021. It is now tracking April 2027. The OIG questioned $49.9 million in unearned award fees granted to Boeing for what it called poor performance. Lockheed Martin, Orion capsule, $3.2 billion in overruns, driven by life support failures and the heat shield catastrophe. Bechtel, Mobile Launcher 2, originally contracted at $383 million. Current cost, $2.7 billion. That is a 7 times cost explosion for a steel launch tower. For context, that is the same price as building the Burj Khalifa. Delivery has slipped from 2023 to spring 2029. Northrop Grumman and Aerojet, solid rocket boosters and RS-25 engines, baseline of $7 billion ballooned to $13.1 billion over 25 years, using 40-year-old heritage shuttle technology that was supposed to save money. Every one of these contracts is cost plus award fee. The taxpayer absorbs all financial risk. The contractors collect profit margins regardless of delays or failures. Boeing gets paid more when the rocket is late. That is not a flaw in the system. That is the system. SpaceX HLS, where it actually stands. While NASA's legacy contractors burn through billions, SpaceX is operating under a firm fixed-price contract worth $2.89 billion base, roughly $4 billion total with Artemis 4 options. Fixed price means SpaceX eats the overruns, and they have completed 49 critical milestones. Not paper reviews, but physical hardware demonstrations. Full-scale inhabited cabin testing for oxygen injection, air distribution, and thermal control. Qualification of the docking adapter based on the flight-proven Dragon 2 system. Cold start Raptor engine demos in simulated vacuum. Lunar landing throttle profiles. Advanced landing software, sensors, and radar for touchdown on unmapped terrain. The one critical bottleneck remaining is orbital refueling. Starship HLS requires approximately 10 tanker flights to fill an orbital propellant depot before it can transit to the moon. Ship-to-ship cryogenic transfer at that scale has never been done. That test was originally scheduled for March 2025 and has slipped to mid to late 2026. NASA has made it clear, without a flawless refueling demonstration, no crewed lunar landing gets certified, but SpaceX is attacking the problem with Starship V3, a 124-meter vehicle delivering 200 metric tons to LEO, dramatically reducing the number of tanker flights required. Musk's view? He said Starship will end up doing the whole moon mission.
I mean, the actual distance traveled on the Ark is close to like 1,000 times further than the moon.
Mark my words. And looking at the alternative architecture, crew launches on a Falcon 9 Dragon to LEO, transfers to a fully fueled Starship, lunar transit and landing, crew returns to Dragon for splashdown. You eliminate SLS entirely. You eliminate Orion and its cracked heat shield. You eliminate the exploration upper stage, Mobile Launcher 2, and billions in ground systems costs. The entire lunar mission runs on flight-proven, commercially operated hardware. the math works. The politics do not. Not yet. But every delay, every overrun, and every leaked hydrogen molecule brings that political tipping point closer. The political war and the China threat. Congress is not going quietly. The Big Beautiful Bill pumped $10 billion into NASA, with $4.1 billion legally mandated for SLS through Artemis 5 and $2.6 billion earmarked for the Lunar Gateway. Months later, Isaacman paused Gateway entirely and redirected the hardware toward surface habitats and nuclear propulsion. That sets up a direct collision between NASA leadership and Senate appropriators who funded those programs specifically to protect aerospace jobs in Alabama, Mississippi, and Texas. International partners are furious. ESA, JAXA, and the Canadian Space Agency invested billions in Gateway modules and negotiated astronaut seats in exchange. Isaacman's announcement blindsided them. ESA Director General Joseph Ashbacher diplomatically expressed dismay at the lack of consultation. The reality is blunter. NASA stranded billions in allied investments without a guaranteed path to the surface. And then there is China. On February 11, 2026, China successfully launched the Long March 10A test booster from Wenchang, including a flawless escape test for the Mengzhou crew capsule that reached 105 kilometers altitude. The Long March 10 delivers 27 metric tons to trans-lunar injection, matching the SLS Block 1 exactly. China's target for a crewed lunar landing is before 2030. With Artemis now slipping to 2028 at the earliest, the margin between the two programs has evaporated. Isaacman acknowledged it directly. The clock is running in this great power competition, and success or failure will be measured in months, not years.